We have a lot of scrap wood that has been collected over a couple of years since we started woodworking. But recently, we've been struggling with not having enough space, so all of this has to go. And what else to do with it than turn it into something nice? So this is what we're gonna be working with, a bunch of small offcuts from random pieces of wood. As you can see, all of these pieces are pretty much the same in color, and that is because we are using mostly native European wood. We of course have some other colorful pieces, but those tend to be expensive, so those are saved for more special projects. When we were trying to come up with what to make as our first scrapwood project, we had a couple of ideas. First one was supposed to be a simple nightstand, then a tall lamp, and then we decided on a shelf, because it would probably be easiest of the three options to make. But since neither of us had made anything like this before, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, and what was supposed to be an easy project turned into something different and out of proportions. Here is what we'll be using. It is not the final mount, the rest was cut and sanded after this, but sorting them now helped with letting us know which type was gonna be most frequent. Having the ability to make a detailed vision of what to make and how to make it is extremely helpful. So once again I made a 3D model of individual blocks to see how exactly it would look. And at first I wasn't planning on making it because I thought I would just wing it. But having a clear idea of what you're making or doing makes things significantly easier. So this shelf will consist of layered wood, and I had no idea how will it be in terms of difficulty. But the first layer was pretty easy, placing everything roughly in place, gluing it into bigger and bigger clumps until it was all in one piece. Throughout that process, I quickly realized that this was going to be a very repetitive task, but so far everything was fine. Having a lot of clamps was very helpful in this project, which allowed for more wood to be glued in one go. At the beginning, I used all 20 clamps every time I did a glue up, but as the layers were going higher, I found myself using less and less clamps, but I will explain that once we get there. With the first layer being done, it was on to the sander to make it somewhat even, because the blocks are not all exactly the same height. They are more or less the same, and we thought that it wouldn't be a big deal if there are some small imbalances. Also, it would be great to use the CNC, but unfortunately, the dimensions were too large. Moving on to the second layer, it was the same as the first one, but this time I had to glue these blocks one by one, which wasn't a problem, but sometimes there was this awkward angle or placement of the block which had to be clamped sideways to avoid major gaps. I was trying to choose different color combinations so that there wouldn't be same colors next to each other to make it more vibrant, but we had so much ash wood that it was the most prevalent wood by far. Generally, wood glue cures after a couple of hours, ideally 24, but that would take forever to finish, so every hour or so I came back to take off the clamps, glue on some more pieces and repeat. At layer 3 the unevenness was starting to get a little more noticeable, in terms of blocks not fitting properly, so some minor gaps were present, but still nothing too worrying. By the time I was done with the third layer, I was already sick of gluing this, and it wasn't even halfway. After I finished the third layer, I noticed that it was getting kinda heavy, and I don't know why this didn't occur to me earlier, but I took an average piece, weighed it, and based on the number of pieces in my 3D model, it would weigh about 30 kilograms, or around 66 pounds, if I stuck to my plan of having 8 layers, so some adjustments were needed. This shelf was designed to be hollow, to save material and weight, and to have room for lights, because the bottom side will have these empty spaces for lights, which is supposed to be like when you have a roof of a cave and there is light coming in from the surface, but in this case it's going to be reversed, so light coming out of the structure, which I thought might look nice and to act as a visual bonus. Now this is where it starts to become a shelf, and that is a line of blocks that will be cut in a straight line to make a flat top. Also in the middle there will be a little cave, just to add a little bit of flavor, and to have a small secret space for like a phone or something. Going up a layer, it was more of the same, still gluing blocks together, but I was starting to feel like it's getting harder to find space to clamp the wood, and there were some pretty noticeable gaps, so that block height difference was starting to catch up with me, and I realized that this was just the start of this. Because of that, I had to carefully choose the placement of each block to avoid any more major gaps. By this point it was starting to get too dirty, so I had to use the vacuum cleaner, and it made it a whole lot better. And most importantly, it got rid of the metal dust from clamps, which started to get into the glue and oxidized, which created these dark spots, or at least I think that's what made them. Seeing that gluing everything in one line wasn't such a great idea, I tried to divide it into 3 segments, which will be glued individually, to hopefully have less holes, and it was somewhat of a success. At this point I just had enough of this and had to take a break for a couple of days. And during that I started working on something else, something that I knew I couldn't blow out of proportion. This is the last layer that will close it up, and the first half wasn't a problem, but the other side was so uneven that it was just too much, and this is the area where it went wrong. You can see how much higher it is than the right side, but I just started gluing the part that was okay, and also there was no space where I could put clamps, so I had to use our weight plates. The other side was later fixed with a router, which allowed me to finally close it up. At this point it was about 90% done, and I just added these small cliffs so that the front wouldn't be so flat. I also wanted to add some extra detail and most importantly to hide gaps, and for that I used these wooden fries. Now I just had to chisel out excess dried glue, lightly sand the whole structure and fill these gaps with wood chips and glue. We were very excited to see all those colors pop with finish applied, and I think it looks great how vibrant it is. But I was surprised how long it took to apply finish, because there were so many signs to paint, and after that I had to remove the excess oil, which also took a while. And normally I would add another coat with this oil, but this time I think one coat is enough. The added feature of this build are lights, which are just LEDs on a copper plate, and this was done by my dad, because I'm not very proficient in this. This light setup has a nice feature of having multiple colors and different light modes to choose from. Final step was to attach the hanging mechanism, which is in this case French cleat. Earlier during this video I said that it would weigh about 30 kilograms if I stuck to my plan and that some adjustments were needed. And now I'm telling you that I made no adjustments and it weighs 31.4 kilograms, which is pretty heavy for a shelf, but since the hanging system is so robust, the weight wasn't an issue. This project was a great lesson in gluing and all its properties. Patience, because there was a lot of waiting involved. Perseverance, due to it being very repetitive. And also acrobatics, because this whole project was done in a tiny room, while constantly being hunched over and tiptoeing over boxes of wood scraps. But with all of that, I think it turned out great. And in the future, we will definitely make more scrapwood projects. But for next time, probably on a smaller scale.